There's always a lot of this talk about, you hear about this with the video game experience with children. Our children are going to grow up to be killers if they play a lot of combat games, or any game, Halo or whatever game. That isn't found to be the case in the long run when you do good controlled studies. You may see an immediate reaction after playing a violent video game of a child being less pro-social, or they may be more quick to snap in the short term. But there hasn't been the kind of research needed to say that kids that play a lot of video games, violent video games, are going to turn into sociopaths later on in life. I think people do have the frontal lobe function to know the difference between what they do in a simulation and what they do in the outside world, and the consequences that are different in both of those situations. People have always questioned the introduction of new media, for good or bad. For example, in the 50s, comic books were the root of all evil. In the 60s, television was going to lead to decay of the mind. Rock music in the 70s, on and on and on. And now video games, because they're so popular, are getting the bullseye put on them, so to speak, as a technology that could lead to more harm than good. I don't believe that's necessarily true. I think humans adapt to media, and media in and of itself, as with any technology, is neither good nor bad. It's the use that it's put to. So in this case, the use here, and in many other types of applications, I think support communication, support a bonding that never would have occurred without that technology. We will see from this war, if you can say, some good, in that there's a lot of funding out there to study traumatic brain injury, study ways to rehabilitate it, advances in prosthetic devices, advances in how we treat PTSD or the results of trauma. I wish that funding was available when we didn't have a war, because every 90 seconds in the United States somebody suffers a brain injury that requires hospitalization and rehabilitation. Well, where was the money for all those folks for the last 20 years? It's only been recently now that there's been this uptick in funding available for TBI research that derives out of the war. So it's, excuse the expression, the double-edged sword here of, war is horrible, but it does drive innovation in healthcare and in rehabilitation.